Hi everyone, this is Tanya from Flying Dog Studio. Thank you so much for joining me as I add another piece to my Beatrix Potter and Postcard series study. And if you missed it, this is from a previous Beatrix Potter study, and I'm going to take her technique and add it to my own technique and do a little more realism without the lines. So if you saw my last video, I did that as well, and this is my last time to do this, but not my last time to reference Beatrix Potter in my work. As you can see, I have pre-drawn the piece and I have gone over it with a kneaded eraser and kind of knocked back the lines. I'm going to tape it down now and add that pencil. That is the Derwent Inktense Baked Earth pencil. I'm going to do a light wash of that so that I can get a tea look to it, kind of an aged look to it. So I have a cup of water and I have one of my Winsor and Newton brushes, and I'm already making a mess on here. No problem, we'll just wipe that up. But that is the brush I'm going to be using. It holds quite a bit of water, but not as much as my mop brush, so I'm going to use that to kind of go over this. Now I am taping it down to the desk. I don't normally tape my work, but when I add this much water, and this is such a small piece, this is a postcard size, it is a 6 by I believe 4.5, it will curl up on me. So put the very light hand on getting a coat of this pencil on there, and now I'm coming back with the water. And I'm sorry, I'm a little distracted. My dog's barking in the background. I hope you guys can't hear that, but he is barking. So that is finished. I blow dried it. Now I have my Winsor and Newton paints, and with my travel set I got this, and I think it's a size 2 brush, and then I have my size 6 round brush, and this is not the container that it came in. Of course, if you've watched my videos, I put it in this particular palette because, as you can see, it shows up so much better on the screen than the other one. It just fits so you guys can see my paint mixing. Now I will have those colors listed on the screen in case I forget to mention them or I'm talking about something else. But I am basically starting with that French ultramarine blue, and there goes my dog again, so sorry about that. I'm starting with that French ultramarine blue, and I have the alizarin crimson, and I'm going to get a nice purple wash on all of these little flowers. Now I will change from the French ultramarine to the Winsor blue, but I'll do that later on in the video, and I'll tell you when I'm doing it, because I want to get a different variety of purples in here. I don't want the same purple. I only had 2 shades of purple in the original piece where I was trying to emulate Beatrix Potter's style with the lining and everything that she did with her art. But on this one, I wanted to do it a little more realistic and not use the lines, which means I'm going to have to add more color. I'm going to have to be a little more precise with where I place the color, because I'm not going to have those ink lines to lean into. So that's what I'm going to be doing here. I'm going to hop off for just a second, and I'm going to hop back on when we get to a very pivotal point in this piece. This is that very pivotal point in the piece, and I am following Miss Potter's technique in that I'm putting down color and I'm dropping other color on top to allow it to mix right on the page. I'm not using a lot of water normally, and if you watch my videos you know that I like to work with my window open. I have my window closed in this, but what happened to me, I didn't adjust my paints accordingly, and the air conditioner came on and the vent is right above my table, and instead of the gentle flow of air coming in the window, I had an extreme amount of air blowing down on my head. And why I didn't stop and simply close the vent, I don't know. I just kept working. I think it's that ADHD. I got focused on it, and when I hyper focus, I can't stop. So I was working along here, and what is slowly happening to me is I'm getting way too much color on there. You can see things are getting pretty dark, but I'm thinking it's okay because stuff is darker when you put it on, but it gets lighter when it dries. But you can see on my palette, my paint is getting a little too thick. You don't want it to get that thick. So I'm painting, and you can tell when I start to slow down and I start to hesitate putting on color. So I'm going to have to fix this before I can go on to the rest of the piece. And the first thing I do, you'll notice in just a minute, the video is going to switch off, and I'm going to be closing the vent above my head. I can't open my window because there was yard work being done and I have allergies. So here I am fixing it. And what I'm doing, and I'm giving you a close-up here, I am putting water on, and I'm taking a clean brush and I'm just dabbing it with my microfiber cloth. I'm also yelling to my daughter in the background and asking her if she could bring me a paper towel because I didn't want to transfer paint from my microfiber cloth onto my piece here because I'm already at the point. So she's brought it in. So you're going to see here is the paper towel in the picture. But I'm already at the point that I kind of want to just trash this and start over, but I'm continuing on because I thought this would be a good lesson in how to fix a mistake. So dabbing it, I'm still not getting enough off, so I'm going to reach to the side in just a second and pick up another brush. And that brush is my Royal & Langnickel scrubber brush. And it's about to make an appearance. Hang with me, I'm stretching to get it. There it is. All right, and to use this brush, you're simply gonna wet it and make sure it doesn't have any paint on it. And you're very lightly, it looks like I'm doing it hard, but you're very lightly gonna scrub this surface. And there it is. It's from their Zen series. It's called the scrubber brush. So you can tell that is much lighter. It matches the amount of saturation I have on the purple. So I'm gonna continue on and just ignore that for the moment and pretend it's not there. And that was hard to do. So I'm gonna continue on here. My daylight is leaving me at this point. As you know, if you've watched my videos, I do this over probably a couple day period. I have to do it in a couple of settings because I do have arthritis and fibromyalgia, so I can only sit for so long. Plus the ADHD, I can only sit for so long. So the daylight was leaving me, and I'm going to continue on and get as much of the greenery as I can today. Now I'm painting up at the top again, but that has dried, so you can see I can now put definition of leaves up there. And I couldn't do that before because my paint was too thick. So if it gets too thick on you, don't throw it away. Just use a clean brush, put water on it, dab it up. Never rake across your paper, just dab, or get a scrubber brush and very lightly with water on it, very lightly scrub across the top and pull some of that color up. I'm going to be quiet and let you watch me paint, and I'll hop back on in just a second. We have started a new day at this point, and I'm going to work a little more on that greenery. And I'm going to have the same colors at the bottom. If I have already put them on the screen, I'm not going to be putting it on the screen again unless I'm mixing it differently, and I forget to tell you on here. But we still have that sap green. I have the cadmium free yellow. The burnt sienna is in the center, and then the blues at the bottom are the French ultramarine and the Winsor blue. And I've not mixed them together at this point as far as the two blues at the bottom. I will, coming up, I will take that sap green and just go ahead and mix them with the blues at the bottom. But right now I'm mixing them one at a time, and I'm allowing myself to drop them in. And as you can see, what that does is it gives me a variety of greens. I don't want to use just one green. I don't want to make up a green and then add black to it and go back and forth with a dark green and a light green. I want to have blue greens and yellow greens and some of those sap greens and some olive greens. I want to go back and forth because this photo was taken probably in the middle of the day. This is one of the plants that my husband grows in our flower garden in the backyard, and I take pictures throughout the day just to have different shadows and different looks. And see, as you can see here, we have a little bit more of a blue green, and that's good for shadows because shadows aren't necessarily black. We don't want to just add black into everything. We want to kind of make it vary just a bit from the green that we have, and we do that by adding the yellow and by adding the different shades of blue. So that's what I'm going to be doing here. And I do have the burnt sienna because it's wonderful for the stem. You can see right in the middle of that flower where the stem is exposed, and that is the burnt sienna in there. And when I put the green down and put that on top, it just blends beautifully, and it gives that nice, almost an olive color in there. It tends a little bit more to a reddish brown. You see that in there. But all of this is just a layer for me. These aren't my final colors. These are just my bases. And I can come back at the end and you will see that, and I will mention it when we get there. I can make a color for a shadow that's going to allow me to put it on everything that you see, whether it's purple or it's green, and it's going to add a different shadow to it. It's going to work with those layers underneath. So that is the beauty of watercolor. I am allowing myself to put a thicker coat of watercolor on, and it's almost, think of it more like syrup. It's less watery and more syrupy. I guess that's a word. But I'm doing that to give a little bit more definition to these little buds that were on top. And they're kind of purple and they're kind of brown. They're almost an eggplant color. But I'm adding the colors on top. You can see I added a little too much purple. When that happens, just put some water on your brush and go back in with the correct color and color correct it. So that works perfectly fine. But you're going to be seeing this in here. I'm going to be, and that's part of my style that I'm mixing with Beatrix Potter's work, and that was my whole purpose for studying her, was to learn some of her techniques so I could add it to my own, not so I could do everything like her, but to borrow from her work. And I believe the saying goes, good artists borrow, great artists steal. I don't really want to steal from her. I don't want to steal her entire style, I just want to use it for my own because I think she has a wonderful blending technique and I want to use that in my art. But I want to add some of my own stuff in there as well. One thing that I really like to do is illustrate, and I have illustrated some children's books. Some I have done traditional, and my latest one was digital. And I do love to do digital art. If you're interested at all in digital art, that's how I started this channel, was in digital art. I just told someone that recently. I started this channel as a digital art channel, and I just did digital art. And I had started that because of arthritis. It was easy for me just to work on my iPad. And if you're interested in doing that, I use Procreate on an iPad. If you don't have an iPad and you have an Android, there's some other wonderful digital art programs out there. Art Rage is one that I used with my students, and I'm trying to think, there was a drawing app. If I can think of it, I'll put it down below. It'll take me a bit to think about it. I haven't taught that in several years, but Procreate is the one that I use. So that's how I started this channel. I do love to illustrate, so I like to take some of those techniques and add it in. And in illustrating, I like to use a little thicker paint to give me a little bit more of an edge. So you're going to see that as we move along this piece. It kind of veers it a little bit away from what a watercolor piece would look like and gives it more of, I don't want to say gouache, but actually it gets a little bit thicker where it kind of looks like gouache. Yeah, I've seen people use gouache and I'll look at it and go, is that watercolor? Is that acrylic? Is that gouache? And you really have to look at it. And sometimes I even have to go down, if I'm on Instagram, and read the hashtags to see if they put hashtag gouache down at the bottom. So depending on how you use some of these mediums, it's going to look different. And so this is going to be a little bit different look than just a standard watercolor at the end. And that's because I'm adding in some of my own techniques that I used when I was doing some of the illustrations. So just a long-winded thing to give you an explanation of what my techniques are here. If you've been watching closely, you've probably noticed that I keep going over to my palette and I will add some of that alizarin crimson, or I will reach for the French ultramarine blue, and I will eventually reach for the Winsor blue. And when I do that, you can see that the colors are changing. I'm getting a little bit more red violet, and there I hit the alizarin crimson, and I'm putting that in. I believe I hit the Winsor blue. Maybe I went back to that French ultramarine. It went really quickly, but it does give me some different shades of purple, and we need that for these because these had different shades in them. And at the end, I'm going to come back with just some alizarin crimson and go over only parts of these little petals. But if you look at the plant in the photo, and I will have this, by the way, if it's not already up on my blog, and I'll put that link below, I will include my drawing of this piece if you want to follow along, and I will also have the original reference photo for you. But these flowers look like just a mass of purple, and depending on the time of day that you take a photograph and the angle, it will look just like a mass of purple. So sometimes it's hard to distinguish where these petals are. Hopefully I have done a good enough job on this that if you're using my drawing, you'll be able to see where the petals separate. One thing I did forget, up at the very top of the piece where it goes into those little buds, there's a little bud on the right hand side at the top that I did not draw on this piece. I forgot to draw it on the last piece and remembered and went back in and drew it, and I did the same thing on this piece. I don't know why. I guess I just didn't think it was significant, but I didn't get it drawn in on this one, and I didn't realize until I put this video together, and I went, oh, I forgot to draw that again. I've been known to forget to draw entire fingers on hands when I'm doing a portrait, so have to go back and add it in at the end. I don't know. But I'm going to continue to add these colors, and as you can see, with each successive pass, we get a little bit more definition, and I'm adding more color, so we'll have a variety of greens as we head through the piece. One thing I really liked about Beatrix's work is when she would paint leaves, she didn't necessarily draw in the veins or paint in the veins. Now, she did paint with her or draw with her paintbrush, but she did what I am doing here, and that is have one shade of green down on the leaf, and then on the other side put a different shade, and you can really see it on this one that I'm working on now. So I have one shade down, and while it is still wet, I'm putting the other one next to it. Now, she did not use a lot of water on her brush. She did what I like to call dry brushing, so those two colors did not mix completely on that leaf, and you can tell that there is a vein that runs in the center, and you're going to see me use this. This is something that I borrowed from her. That is something I'm adding into my piece that she did. Also with the stem going down the center, how I dropped in the color, and that is something else that she did with her art. I'm going to add some shading on this leaf that I'm working on now. I have green in my brush, but I've gone up to the purple and I'm adding the purple in. And you can see that has added a nice dark color, but I have not used black in anything. If you're interested, if you're new to watercolor and you're interested in how to mix colors and how to blend things together and how just to get started, if this seems a little overwhelming, if you want to try something like this, but it seems overwhelming, I am going to start a new series just for beginners where we look at the color wheel and we look at layering colors, just something simple, just simple projects where you can work up to things that are a little more complicated. And I'll have that coming up in the next few weeks. I'm actually going to start on that today. This is the end of June 2025 if you're watching this piece today as it's coming out. Now, this is something else I told you I would be doing, and this is some of that layering that we will be learning, but this is a little more advanced. I am going straight in with the alizarin crimson. It's extremely watered down, and I'm going just on top of these petals that are dry. And that's one trick to layering. You have to make certain that everything is dry before you layer on top, or you're just going to pull the color back up. And my brush, and that was an area that I needed a little bit darker, so I'm going in with stuff wet and it's blending together. I just needed it right on the edge to kind of bend that petal backwards. So I'm adding some of the final touches on here with these petals, trying to get that final red violet and finish up these petals. The center of these flowers is extremely dark. So instead of pulling in black, I'm pulling in some Payne's Gray. And I'm having to go back and forth between the Payne's Gray and the alizarin crimson because there we go. Finally, it is the right shade of purple, which tends to be a little more blue violet, adding just a tiny bit more of the alizarin crimson in there because we need that to be dark, but not too dark. We want to come back. In the end, I'm going to need to add these little white dots, and I'm not going to be using gouache. You could use gouache for that. I don't have any on hand. My daughter does, but I found out it's a little too old and stuff is separated in it. So instead of messing with that, I'm going to be using my Posca pen, and you'll see that coming up in just a minute. I'm doing some final touch-ups and some final shading on here. And this is the part I wanted you to see. Now, I'm using the greens and I'm working on that stem, but I need something darker because there are some really dark shades in here. So I'm coming up to this color up here and I'm using a little bit of the green and I'm mixing it with the purples that I have at the top. Remember, those are the Winsor Blue, French Ultramarine, and the Alizarin Crimson. And I'm adding that not only to the greens, but you'll also see me add that to the purples. And depending on what's underneath, it's going to give me these wonderful shaded areas. And again, I do apologize. My dog has tried so hard to be a good boy through this whole thing, but he's barking again. But we are going to, regardless of that, we're going to keep on working with this and add all these final shading details on with that one color at the top. If you have made it this far in the video, kudos to you. I appreciate your being here. I'm always happy when you show up and you comment and you participate and we can learn together as a community. And speaking of learning, I am wanting to learn the techniques of another artist. So I have a new series coming up for that as well. And that artist is Cicely Mary Barker. I absolutely love her fairies. My daughter had her fairy books when she was little. I swear she thought she was a fairy. She loved all fairies. So that work is near and dear to my heart. And I want to learn her technique. And there are some things about Beatrix Potter's art that I think kind of go along with Miss Barker's art. So here's that Posca pen that I told you that we were going to do. I have a fine tip on there to prime these. These are just acrylic markers. You tap them on a piece of paper and the fluid runs to the end, and then you can add your detail. And that's what I use this for, is adding detail. But we will be taking a look at Miss Barker's work in some upcoming videos. I'm excited about that. I hope that you will be excited as well. Let me know what you think. At the end here, you're going to see both pieces. The one I did previously with Beatrix Potter style, and then the one where I have added her style to my style of art. Personally, I prefer hers. I really like the inking, but let me know what you think. So we have all of those things coming up, the beginner art and the Cicely Mary Barker. I hope you will join me, but until then, I will see you in the next one.